What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my random horror review series. I am your host, Mood616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yeah, episode 83 is here, and I've got one from the year of 1933. Yes, this one is pretty old, and it's coming from the film detective who, if you're not familiar with the company, they basically specialize in restoring like public domain films and, you know, kind of films from the golden age of horror. So the film in question here from 1933, like I said, is called The Vampire Bat. This is a film I've seen before, actually a couple times, and was really curious to check this out on Blu-ray because, you know, it's just very cool when these type of films get this type of treatment because many of them don't at all. They remain in that public domain field where they just kind of circulate with shitty transfers and things like that. But that's why we have the film detective and stuff like that. Of course, this one right here is starring Lionel Atwill, Fay Wray, and of course Melvin Douglas. Fay Wray, of course, being most notably famous for starring in King Kong. Lionel Atwill and Melvin Douglas actually starred in The Mystery of the Wax Museum. I always remember Melvin Douglas from The Ghost Story from 1981, I think it was, or 1980. And of course he was also in The Changeling too. And this one, of course, is also starring Dwight Frye, who always played this kind of mongoloid, kind of man-child character in like every type of film. He was in Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. He was also in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which unfortunately was his last role. He died of a heart attack shortly after that at the young age of like 44, which was kind of unfortunate. But with all that said, this one, of course, has lots of notable faces in this one. And get into a quick little synopsis here. Basically, what's happening in this small little town, people are ending up dead. And they are being found with like these little puncture wounds in their neck. So in steps Melvin Douglas's character, who plays a detective. He's kind of like the inspector, and he's obviously trying to figure out what's going on in this town. All the townspeople are hell-bent on the theory that there's a vampire on the loose because these bodies are found dead without blood. They're all drained of their blood and stuff. Which kind of leads you to Dwight Frye's character, which he plays the man-child and stuff, and he's obsessed with bats, and of course the townspeople more than likely think that he is responsible for all these murders. But this one right here is essentially a mystery whodunit type story. So, with that said, and my thoughts on this one, now, this film, of course, is from 1933, and we know films that were produced in 1933 were just coming off the silent era. The very first thing I noticed about rewatching this film is that it doesn't have a score. It's very strange. It's kind of like a polar opposite silent film. We all know in silent films they do not talk, but the driving force behind a silent film is the music, really. And of course the subtitles and stuff like that. In this one, it's complete opposite. We get voice acting, but we have no score. And I think rewatching this one, the film does kind of suffer a little bit from the lack of build-up from a score, because we all know that music in films can change a whole scene. This one right here is just almost too silent for its own good and stuff. But with that said, it's pretty good. You know, I have to say the performances from everybody in this one are pretty good. Fay Wray doesn't really have a really big role in this one. She kind of plays the assistant to Lionel Atwill. He's a doctor in this film. He's kind of like he's got a lab and stuff, and he's a doctor. She plays his assistant, but she's more than likely there just for eye candy. You know, they're even doing this in 1933, which is actually pretty interesting. But yeah, so she doesn't really have a lot of dialogue in the film and stuff like that. But the performances are really good. I love Melvin Douglas in this film as the inspector. He does a really, really great job. But the guy that steals the show is Dwight Frye. Dwight Frye, in every scene that he's in this film, he's awesome. He's that very awkward man-child. You know, he's just that kind of decrepit weirdo that everyone just wants to stay away from and everyone suspects is the bad guy and stuff like that. You know, so overall, it's pretty good in that aspect. It's shot pretty well. The editing's a little bit choppy in this film, like really, really choppy at times. But the thing about watching films from the golden age of horror, you know, a film from 1933, it's almost like you're watching 2/3 of a film. I've always said that. The runtime on this film is about 63 minutes. Now, when you start watching this film, it feels like you're starting to watch it in about the second act. It starts with a conversation about, you know, with the detective and the doctors and these other curious townsfolk about this vampire problem. Now, it feels like you just kind of skip to the second act, like a lot of these films do. You know, the time constraints in a lot of these older films definitely doesn't allow the story to develop itself. So there's very, very little character development and things like that in these type of films, which, you know, isn't too bad. It's a quick little watch. You kind of take it for what it is and stuff. But, you know, it is nice to have a little bit of explanations and stuff within the story. because what you get with these older stories is a lot of plot holes when you're not explaining things a lot. And this one does suffer from having a little bit of plot holes, because once the reveal happens in this film, you kind of go, oh yeah, and you think back to what you just watched and you go, yeah, okay, that could have just went anyway. So it's kind of one of those moments and stuff, but with that said, it's not bad. They do explain to a certain degree exactly what was going on with it and stuff like that. So not too bad, but overall, pretty fun film. It's not one of the greatest films from the golden age of horror, that's for sure. If I had to rate this one, I'm going to give it a solid 6.5. I think the performances alone are worth checking out and stuff. There is a couple scenes in this one that really derive straight from Frankenstein. There's one scene where this certain character is being hunted down by this mob, and it just insanely reminds me of Frankenstein. And among a couple scenes, and of course this one is definitely shot on set, so you can tell by just that kind of claustrophobic feel of when you're watching the film. But I think the biggest downfall of this one is just the big plot holes and just the lack of score. I'm a big music person. I love scores. It's one of the first things I notice in films. And being 10 minutes into the film, I'm like, this one doesn't have a score. It's like so bizarre. But yeah, overall, pretty cool release. The transfer looks really good on this. Probably it's the best it's ever can look. It is in full screen because it's probably shot like that. It does have a little bit of features. It's got a featurette with Melvin Douglas' son, which is actually pretty interesting. And it's got an audio commentary, which I did not listen to the whole thing. I did listen to a little bit with film historian with Sam Sherman. So, which is pretty cool. You got to kind of get a little bit of insight into the director and some of the main actors that are in this film and stuff. So, but yeah, with that said, Film Detective doing good work as usual, restoring these classic films from the golden age of horror. So if you're interested, check this out, man. It's definitely worth the money. I mean, it's not very expensive. I think it's probably under $10 for Blu-ray or something like that. So, but yeah, The Vampire Bat from 1933, very enjoyable. Check it out. That is going to do it for episode 83 here, guys. I'll be back with some more reviews right away, so stay tuned for those. And as usual, peace! Yeah.